when I got married, and my wife wasn't working initially, I got a little disconnected with what our new expenses would be, because now we're basically I'm paying for two people. And so that was kind of, a new thing for me. And that's where the budgeting, I think, helped. But I could originally see that I needed to set a budget because my net worth stopped going up so quickly. And I was like, okay, I need to re-examine our budget, or we need to make a budget. But I would say if you're starting out, one of the best things I would recommend is learn to make your net worth statement or a personal balance sheet. And I think that'll go a long ways in just making it front of mind, and just you being cognizant of how your decisions are affecting your net worth.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well, due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident.
Good day, and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Jack Allweil. Jack is an avid reader, male athlete, and soccer fan. Jack has turned his energy to many self-directed projects. He's on a journey to find the intersection of actuarial background and his love for sports and personal finance. Jack believes our country lacks financial education and is eager to help young people get their financial house in order. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Jack. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Thanks so much for having me, Dwight. It's an honor.
Yeah, it's an honor to me too, because being in the finance world, this is my 20th year. It's hard to find people that think at a level of finance where it's something that is throughout our whole lives. It's something that is pattern taught to us from our childhood, and it literally, society continues to help us evolve our thought process, and it's usually not the right way. So it's hard to find guests, not that I haven't had some great guests, but it's hard to find guests that really get it. So I'm excited for this conversation, and we're going to get into quite a bit of some of the things I just mentioned. So let's get going. But one of the things that I really like discussing with people is their origin story. So back to that pattern teaching, that pattern behavior that we're taught from our childhood to our adulthood, everything affects us, right? So I would love Jack to tell me your earliest recollections from little Jack all the way to where you are today. Tell me something about your life, brother. What did you experience as a kid up to now?
Sure. So I grew up in a very small town, about 100 miles north of Detroit, very rural area. So we had a lot of unsupervised playtime, I would say. So my brother and I would constantly be biking to the local party store, buying snacks. And I would say a lot of parents probably frowned upon it. They couldn't believe that my parents would let us, ride our bikes all the way into town. And oftentimes my mom would give us money to go deposit into the bank. And that was really my first memory of money. And so we had a lot of unsupervised playtime. It got to do a lot of entrepreneurial activities. And I think that was helped on by our parents. We didn't discuss money explicitly a lot, but my parents definitely encouraged us to try different things to make money. And one of the things was my mom would go buy us bulk candy from Sam's Club, and we would then sell, Sour Patch straws on our school bus and in the cafeteria at our middle school and high schools. So that was kind of the earliest memories I have of, I guess, the entrepreneurial spirit and money. But like I said, we actually didn't discuss money all that often. And I think that's one thing that I hope people will do more of with their kids going forward, because I think it would have been helpful to discuss the actual numbers around a lot of their decisions, because they didn't have a ton of rental properties, but they had enough that we could have learned a lot from. They had, I think, 3 rental properties at the time when we were growing up, and we would go help them, do some tiling work in the bathrooms and kitchens. And we even replaced a roof with our uncle on one of the homes, but we didn't really look at the numbers behind a lot of those activities. And that's one thing that looking back, I hope to do with my kids a little more, I would say. But we definitely had a very good upbringing, and were encouraged to try all sorts of things. Now, I guess going forward, 2016 is really when I felt like I got kind of like kicked down, and I had to have like a life reset. Now, I had moved to Charlotte, North Carolina in 2015, and I started this new job. It was an actuary job, and within an 18-month span, I had worked under 3 different managers. So the company was quite turbulent. And I eventually lost my job after those 18 months. And at that time, I was kind of thinking like, man, I really don't want to be in this position again. I think I need to get my life to be a little bit more robust. And that's kind of when the wheels really started turning, and I started to feel more awake, I would say. And I had never read really before. I'll say I never liked reading before. But when I got fired, I had more time to myself, and I took a trip to Europe, where I actually met my now wife in Austria. And I also started reading a ton after I visited the Auschwitz concentration camp outside of Krakow in Poland. And that trip spurred so many questions about World War II and the Nazis and the Jews in Poland that I really started reading a lot. And those books turned into soccer books that I was interested in. And then those, cascaded into just reading anything, economics, personal finance. And then I kind of stumbled upon real estate and this idea of house hacking. And I basically decided that when I got another job, I was going to get underwritten for a loan. I was going to get a house, and I was going to rent out the other rooms. And in doing so, I was hoping that my life would be a little bit more robust and able to withstand another job firing, for instance. So I guess I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I took away from that. Like nowadays, people are so scared to let their children go and do things. Your parents allowing you to drive into, bike into town, or your mom giving you money to deposit in the bank. It brought back a memory of myself growing up with my own father. He used to, initially, before I got my driver's license, he'd say, come with me, because I'd be at his business working. I had to at a young age. And I'd go with him to the bank, and he'd hand me, and he'd say, go up to the teller. He'd be obviously right behind me, and I'd go up, and I'd be shaking because there'd be an envelope full of money. Because back then it was a lot of cash-based stuff. It was checks. There was no credit cards. He didn't accept credit cards or any of that, right? So literally, I remember being nervous. And then all of a sudden, when I got my driver's license, he'd say, okay, here, do all these numbers, understand this. And that's when I got the first realization of the amount of numbers, the inflows and outflows that happen with his actual business. And he'd say, okay, take this, deposit these checks. Here's a stack of money, take that in too. And I remember the first time doing that and the pride I felt. It was just, and when you brought that up, it just rushed back to me. Hey, I used to have to do that for my folks too, for my mom and dad. So that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And your introduction to business, buying the candy and going to selling on the bus in school. I used to do that myself, though. I used to have a paper route. So I used to take money from my paper route and I go buy candy, and I'd come back to the school and I'd sell it to people, right? And I didn't do it for a long period of time, but again, brought back another memory, which is interesting that I'm not the only person that was a mini entrepreneur. For you, it was your mom that was helping you out, which is cool. And you're right though about the fact that many of us don't get numbers discussed with that, and we'll talk about that and have more conversations as we proceed. But so your parents had you help in the rental properties, but they didn't really talk to you about anything. The cold hard reality of 20 years in finance, I know that most of the numbers with people that own rental properties are not good. They struggle, right? They're literally lucky after they pay a mortgage payment if they're got a lot left over, or if something does happen, you're being the person, like you said, you're in doing tile work or you're repairing or fixing things, which takes away from the bottom line of what you're trying to achieve with a rental. So if had they discussed the numbers, like, I don't know how well they did, maybe they were one of the few, but I have like so many clients that have rental properties, and the nightmare stories. I just sat with a client a few days ago. They can't wait to get rid of theirs. And I had rentals and I got rid of them because of the same fact. At first it was amazing, right? The numbers were good. Then all of a sudden had a bad renter, destroyed the place. Well, what was it going to do? Well, at bottom line, you can go through insurance, right? You have some options, but majority of the time I'd end up having to tear a bathroom apart, fix holes in walls, replace carpets, or, linoleum, or whatever the case may be, take out of the equity. And myself, I haven't had very good experience with rentals. So, if you want to add anything to that, do you have any good experiences? I know you were thinking about doing it, but did your parents ever finally share with you how their rental business went? Like,
I think some of their rentals back then were not so good, and one actually got burned down, unfortunately, and they did not have insurance on it. That was in Saginaw, Michigan. My rentals. So we have 13 units right now. I did the house hack. I started that in 2017,
okay.
and then I got through all the podcasts and reading. I learned about different strategies for acquiring properties. And the first set of five units, there's one single family two single families and a 3-unit. And those I actually got through seller financing, where the former owners were basically my bank and I was making a payment to them. Now I got that on a good deal because the couple was going through a divorce. So I've had a good experience in the sense of getting a good deal, but the tenants in a couple of those units have not been a cakewalk, let's say. So like, just for instance, this one couple, like a month and a half ago, basically just left in the middle of the night. They had been getting some of the COVID relief money, but I just found out my dad's office is actually close to there, and he drove by one morning and said, it doesn't look like anyone's in the house. And my property manager, who I pay 10% of the gross rents to, hadn't told me a thing about, them being late for rent. So I have since switched property managers on that property. So that one's been a little rough. And then last summer, I got a 7-unit also by where I grew up in Bay City, Michigan. And that one, the quality of tenant seems to be a little better. And it's just a little easier to manage because I don't have so many like insurance policies to manage, and there's just one roof. So I think there's going to be real added benefits to having more units under one roof. And those original 5, I think over this next year, I'm going to look to update a little bit, get the rents up a little more because they haven't really been raised that much. And then maybe look to sell those and do a 1031 exchange to move up in just size of properties and try to get more units under fewer roofs. And then we also last year we thought we should diversify a little bit away from Michigan and the long-term space, and we we got our first short-term rental that's in a condotel in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And from the outside, it looks like a hotel, but the units are actual condos inside, and they are managed
Wow.
by a property manager inside. And the added benefit of that is it's about a 3-hour drive from where we are right now. So in the off season, if we wanted to use it for a week or two, we could use it no problem, and it doesn't really affect our rents that we're getting because it's the down season anyway.
So you said it was short rental. Are you doing it through like VRBO or
So
Airbnb?
so it's no, it's not one of those. It's just like the resort has like a website, and you
Oh, okay.
basically can book it like any other hotel.
Oh, I
If you
see.
were to just go to the website, you'd think it's a hotel.
Oh, okay. And so you have 7 units within inside this structure then.
So
So,
so that one, it's the short-term rental is just one condo unit,
oh, okay.
but it's right on the ocean. It's very
Oh, it
cool,
sounds awesome.
and something we get to enjoy also.
Perfect. So do you do this with your parents, like with your family, or is this
No, just
yourself?
me, and well, now my wife.
Oh, good for you.
And yeah, so it's been a fun journey. Definitely learning a lot of
Well,
hiccups,
I love how
and
you said though that you learned a lot of this knowledge though through podcasts and books.
mhm,
So people that are listening or watching, knowledge is power. But having a book sitting on the shelf and not reading it, or if you're an Audible fan like me, not listening to it, you need to educate yourself. And I have a good friend of mine, Michael Burns. Michael's been on my show. He lives in Utah, and he does a lot of different specialized house hacking, like you're talking about, and
mhm,
getting properties and stuff. And he actually has gotten so big with it that he's opened his own finance company too to help people do what
cool.
he's doing. Right. So there's lots of money in real estate, but it's not for everybody.
Mhm.
It just isn't. You have to have a stick to itiveness, in my opinion, and be willing to tolerate and put up with, like you said, some of the things, having tenants bail on you overnight, and having managers that necessarily aren't the most, trustworthy, which is
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
not fun. But good for you though. It's you're doing well for yourself. Fantastic. It's yeah, it's not like it's going to go anywhere in the sense that it's going to disappear. People need places to live, so, or vacation to, like your property at Myrtle Beach. So that's good.
I guess one thing that really helped me is at least getting started, and it can seem very overwhelming. I remember feeling very overwhelmed when I started like thinking about doing real estate outside of my primary resident. And and this is another thing I don't think we really teach young people enough is goal setting. Like just breaking up like a very large goal into small pieces. And I started just journaling each day. And I didn't have the goal be like, purchase a property. I had the goal be like, I'm going to reach out to, 50 different property managers and ask them questions about their areas. So I would each day I'd have just 3 mini goals to help me get to that bigger goal. And so every other day or every few days I would call a property manager and just, ask about the areas, ask about the rents, ask if any of their clients were looking to offload their properties. And that's how I ended up getting the deal. So it just, I guess, focusing more on the process versus like a result, I
Oh,
would be an advocate of.
yeah, well, 100%. I actually, um, I'm gonna fast forward into where I put it into the conversation since you brought it up about goal setting. That is a giant weakness. I actually have one of the chapters in my book talks about the fact of goal setting and why it's important, and the weaknesses within our society today to teach anybody about goals. Because really, at the end of the day, somebody saying I have a goal, I want to be a millionaire, is not a goal. It's a pipe dream,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Unless you put something down or you have coaching and mentorship to help you along the way, whether you use podcasts, books, or you have, you know, a mastermind or whatever the case may be, a person needs to understand that things don't happen just because you wish them to be. You have to take action. The secret isn't just wishing it. The secret is wishing it, applying a goal, and then taking some action. Right. So I put in here, you know, people are filled right now with so much indecisiveness, pardon me, and living on a hamster wheel with no direction or purpose, and they're living a camped life. They've forgotten how to dream like they did when they were in their youth and never learned how to goal set. I would like to discuss this since this has come up. Let's do it now. Get your opinion, your insight. So what do you feel is the most important part of taking that first step at any age and making the decision to start climbing in life? Obviously, one of your answers is going to be goal setting, but you know, talk a little bit more about that. What's the first step that a person needs to stop being camped?
Well, I think part of the big question is, why are you doing what you're trying to accomplish, and identifying your why. I know a lot of people throw that around, but it sounds cliche, but it's really true. Like, you really need to figure out why you're doing something, whether it's, you know, to spend more time with your family, or to, you know, meet a spouse. I don't know what the overarching why is, but you need to kind of like drill down into why you're doing something. And then I really believe like writing things down does help, and it helps keep you accountable. And I think you really feel satisfied if you even just a couple things. And there's that, you know, the book, The Compound Effect, where they talk about like just little itty bitty increments each day really can transform into huge changes down the road. And just making that commitment to yourself and writing it down on paper. And I would recommend getting some sort of journal to actually write it down for your goal.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about Darren Hardy, right? Compound Effect.
Yep, exactly. Yep, Darren Hardy.
Yeah. Back to the book thing though, right? Knowledge there's so much knowledge in books, and people just don't get it. Like, even if they get to a point where, you know, they get a journal, and like you said, what's your end result? Know your why. That is perfect answer, because without that, if you don't know your why, what you're trying to accomplish, as you mentioned, finding a, you know, for family, or is it to find yourself a significant other, to make yourself look more appealing? It could be any differing things, but people don't understand that you have to write it down, like you said, have a journal, and literally go and seek out the knowledge. I know anytime in my life, I'm a serial entrepreneur, every time I've wanted to accomplish things that I've accomplished, I've had to have a why. I've had to write it down. I've had to go through, like you said, those small compound effects, those little baby steps in order to succeed. So I appreciate that, you saying that. The next thing I'd like to know, though, is to add on top of that. So, you know, we already mentioned with goal setting, you know, there's different processes. One of the processes I talk about, one of the easiest processes is the SMART process of setting up goals, which those listening and watching, I won't get into it, but you can Google it, or you can check it out in my book. It literally talks about the fact of how to do goals and how simplistic it can be. And it makes it that it's a sensible goal. Just writing a goal down saying, I want to accomplish this, but you have no timeline, you have nothing in place with inside of that goal to accomplish it, is still a pipe dream. You need to be specific about how you apply your goals. Do you have a process yourself that you utilize because you talk about journaling? What do you utilize in order to put down from your 6 inches between your ears down to paper about your goals?
So I think this is kind of a carryover from when I was sitting for the actuarial exams. And that's really when I started, I would say, goal setting, because I had so for people that don't know the actuarial exam process, well, at least in the US and Canada, I know they keep adding exams, but when I finished all of them, there was 8 exams. The first 5 are all multiple choice, and I, by and large, got through those fairly easily. The 6th exam comes around, I fail it 3 times before I pass it. And then the 7th exam, I failed another 3 times. And at that point, I was like just so depressed. I started journaling for the first time. And I had also read a book by Annie Duke, the former professional poker player. And she talks about this concept of resulting. And that is the process of separating your actions from the result. So, for example, when you ask a lot of people what's the best decision they've made, a lot of them really point to times where the result ended up being a good one. And her whole point was you could make the right call in poker and just get unlucky. But I think most people would say, like, if you run through a red light and there's cars whizzing by past you, and just because you get on the other side safely, most people would say that probably wasn't a good decision that you ran that red light. So when I framed my process in more on the process, instead of just passing this exam, I set out the goal, and I did them in 15 weeks. I have found that to be, I mean, maybe that's just because of my actuarial exams, but I've continued on that 15-week type of mentality where I'll set a goal for 15 weeks and make 3 mini goals every single day. And I have like a gratitude practice just where the first thing I answer every morning is, what are you grateful for? But basically I changed my goal from, I want to pass, this 7th exam, to I want to be able to do every single practice problem in this study manual. And I want to be able to go through all these flashcards. So it's more, and the exam itself was on a curve, and it's written. So it's a little bit subjective on some of the grading, and it's not super clear on how they actually grade it. So you really just have to focus on what you can control. And after that, you kind of just have to let it be, because there were times where I felt more prepared and ended up failing exams. And then other times where I didn't feel as good leaving and I ended up passing. So I try to focus more on the process and instead of the result. I guess on the topic of podcasting, I started going on podcasts because I heard someone talk very favorably of their ability to increase their public speaking skills through going on podcasts. And I heard this woman talk about Podmatch, and for a 15-week period, my goal was I was going to reach out to 200 podcasts to see if I could come on their show. So every day I would just message 2 podcasts, and after the 15 weeks, pretty much I was good. And now I probably got on about 20 podcasts, but I still put forth the effort and focused on just doing the action instead of the result, I guess.
I love that. You're a young man that is very sharp, because most people in their 30s don't get it. But that knowledge all started because of you reading and literally listening to podcasts and being willing to trip and fall and get up and start all over again. Otherwise, just some of the things you've shared, a lot of people would just quit. They wouldn't keep on going. But I like the fact you talk about 15-week process. One of the programs I was involved in, I don't necessarily follow it like I used to. It was a 12-week year. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. That is a good process and program as well in regards to setting up, a 12, because how many 12-week year processes do we have in our lives? People goal set in January, or what I say, they put pipe dreams down in January. They never do nothing. And then come the end of the year, they have nothing accomplished because they don't write it down. So I like the fact that you do that 15-week process and that you focus on the process instead of the results. Those exams, like you said, they're subjective. I'm the same way. I've had exams in my life where I prepared and I put all this energy in and I go to write it, especially when I was in electronics engineering back in the day. I went to a technical college here, and the exams that I put in the least amount of effort, not necessarily that I didn't study, but I guess people hate the terminology, but crammed. I crammed that information and I just gave it away in the sense that I didn't stress about it. I was going to go in and write the exam. I was going to get it done. And sometimes I'd be extremely anxious, and that exam would be the best marks I'd gotten. And the other ones where I was all prepared and thinking, oh, I got all my, ducks in a row, I get slaughtered. And so I can kind of relate to what you're talking about.
I guess one other thing that I didn't mention was I thought after failing the seventh exam 3 times, I felt like I was a little bit unbalanced in my life. I felt a little bit on edge, and I felt like I was letting this exam prep make up too much of my existence. I was like really so what I did was I ended up I'd seen a YouTube video on this guy that ran 100-mile race, and I was like, wow, this is like, I can't believe anyone would do that. So I mean, I didn't run 100 miles, but I did sign up for a half marathon, and I did that while studying, and I felt having that sense of balance with physical activity helped me actually study, because a lot of my buddies in the actuarial field were like, you just need to like study more, like you need to go study more. But I was kind of saying I think I need to get my life a little bit more balanced again, and I thought mentally that really helped too. So I guess just always not neglecting your health,
No, I
or
love
your
that.
physical fitness too.
And you know what, Jack, bottom line, if you can do things physically, you should be doing physically, because physical working out like you were doing, it disconnected you from the anxiety and stress of wondering, am I going to pass? Right? Am I going to get in there and I think I'm going to slay it? And then you're sitting at home wondering until you get the results. But meanwhile, that's amazing. You go do sign up and do a half marathon. Now you're doing different things to your physical body, which people listening, your physical body affects your 6 inches between your ears. It affects how you think and how you process. So those people telling you to study more, all they're doing is telling you to stay camped inside your home or wherever you're studying, maybe a library or at school. You're not disconnecting yourself and allowing your brain to relax, to have a break. So all it's fixated on is your anxiety and stress, because your subconscious is feeding it when you're awake and when you're sleeping. So good for you for bringing that up. I 100% concur. Physical activity is great. Everybody should, and it's also one additional thing I will add, proper nutrition too, and sleep. Probably the number one thing out of everything we've talked about is you need a good night's rest. You need good night's sleep. I used to be one of those people that would think, oh, I'm not going to go to sleep. I'm going to study all night until like half hour before the exam. And don't do that. Don't do that, people. Get a good night's rest. Have, good nutrition in your life, have exercise, and surround yourself with good associations of people. So that's the next thing I want to talk to you about is, Jack, what do you believe? Maybe you haven't had to do this, but what is your take on having a person having a great mentor on their journey to succeed in life?
I think it's something. I think early on I was very shy. I was very shy as, middle school, high school, and even into college. And that's kind of why I ended up going down this actuarial path, was because I was told, like, you basically just have to pass the exams. And in college, I kind of had neglected networking and making like genuine connections with my professors. And I feel like they could have helped me a lot. And now I do try to make an effort to reach out to people where I see attributes that I would like to emulate in some way, to get more insight into how they're operating. I would definitely be in favor of getting mentors, and it's I guess one thing, it's still hard. You kind of have to figure out how you can give value to that person if you're going to reach out to them, because it's gotta go both ways. You can't just be take, I guess.
Well, it's true. Absolutely. Bottom line though, when I was in college, I agree with you. I didn't necessarily network with all my professors. I had a couple that I was, I'd get, especially with some of my control system classes and stuff, I'd go and talk to them because I needed help, right?
Mhm.
A little bit of support, but I didn't necessarily connect with them on a level where, what do you think? Where should I go? Am I doing, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of times, though, it's because of our age. We figure we're bulletproof. I used to be one of those people that was, I don't need that person's help. I can figure it
Yeah.
out on my own. And realizing that, figuring it out on our own, I got to go through all the school of hard knocks, skin my knee, and it might take months. Whereas if I actually just give it up and, like you said, connect with somebody and be vulnerable with them, maybe I can collapse timeframes down to a few weeks, let alone a few months or a few years, just by they've got life experiences. They've already gone through the school of hard knocks and collapsed timeframes. But when I was young, I was just stubborn. I thought, oh, I can figure it out on my own. But once I had that realization that somebody knows more than I do, and there always will be somebody out there, no matter how good I get in my field of choice, there is always going to be somebody that has a little bit more experience. And, how would you say, though, what you said, that you need to give them something, you need to have something in exchange? Don't you believe there's a process where you can talk to people and not have to give them anything in exchange except for some kindness and vulnerability?
Sure. There's definitely instances. There's also, I guess I would, I guess reframe it a little bit in the sense of, don't feel bad about paying for someone's experience. Like if there's a class or something that you can get knowledge from, don't feel bad like paying for it. I mean, recently,
I love that.
one thing, with the real estate market and on the like long-term rentals, I saw the rent ratios weren't as attractive. And, listening to podcasts, once again, I heard about this idea of flipping vacant land. And I started looking into it, and, these people seemed very knowledgeable. And I ended up paying what most people would consider was an extreme amount to take this class through this group of land investors. And so I guess you're gonna, if you don't, you might pay for it in your own time, or you could just kind of, fast forward and don't feel bad about paying for more education. I
Good
actually
answer.
don't quite understand why we don't really question like paying for college. And sometimes when we're paying for these other types of classes outside of the traditional education system, people kind of frown upon or question that. But and I think the increased inflation has helped me along this, because I was like, man, like my money's not going as far. I think I need to up my skills. Like, and if this money's not going to be worth that much anyway, I might as well, try to buy some knowledge,
Well,
get
but
some more
because
skills.
people, I 100% agree. Your answer was awesome. I love the way that we're connecting in our, in this communication about just life and goal setting and moving forward. And there's nothing wrong with paying for somebody else's knowledge and skills. And people will get 50, 60, 80 grand in debt going to college or university from somebody. And again, this isn't a slight on the professors, but many professors have never ever done it themselves. They're teaching out of a book. They're very kind, but I'd sooner, if I had to fast forward, anybody's life, go look for people that have the skills that are actually performing and hire them. It doesn't have to be a college. It doesn't have to be universities. Some of the most successful people in my life have been because they've gone and paid for that knowledge, and they get out of their mindset. I don't know what your thought is, but one of the biggest things I find with people is they always think that that's an expense, right? You alluded to the fact that it's an investment. The inflationary stuff was happening. You're not getting the value. Why not use the money you have and actually apply it to something to get value? And I will add to the listeners and people watching, I've, even as of late, invested like $8,000-9,000 into something I thought that would be really good, and it ended up not being that good. Initially, I was really upset, but I sat down and I actually broke it down right? Don't even need to write it down. I journaled in my own brain and said to myself, now, what did I get out of it? I looked at the notes I had taken, right? Instead of sitting there and having that boo-hoo, woo-hoo mentality like most people have that invest in things, whether it's college, whether it's somebody that has the knowledge and skills I'm looking for, and they quit instead of realizing, well, you know what? That's just one step closer. That's a stepping stone for me to be successful. What did I get out of it? What did I learn so that I don't repeat that same mistake again? But I still had something good out of it. So you have to look at both sides of the coin, but always be on the more positive side of it. So I love that you mentioned that. People, go out and don't be afraid to spend money. I've had people literally go and finance to get coaching, to get mentorship in what they wanted to do. And other people in their lives think they were crazy. And then fast forward to 1, 3, 5 years later, that person that did it, in most cases, is way farther ahead on the curve of life. And the person that made fun of them is still sitting there wallowing in pity and having a pity party. Like the pandemic was a prime example. Where are people now, 2 years after the pandemic? Many are still stuck where they've been stuck. And it's because they're not willing to invest in their lives, and they think of everything as an expense instead of an investment.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, everyone talks about like, compound interest, but we don't talk about compound knowledge as much. Just going from idea to idea, passion project to passion project, then, down the line, a lot of those ideas come together in some way that could benefit you greatly.
Well, maybe a person's why changes even. You can have
True.
a why today, wouldn't you agree, Jack? And that could change. You could start along the process. You could put down the goals. You could do your 15-week process. And somewhere along the way, there's people that don't acknowledge the fact that something doesn't sit right. They don't listen to their inside voice, or what their body is telling them in regards to it, and they continue to push forward with it. And then when they're done, they're not satisfied doing it. Just like college and university. The first time I ever went to college, computer engineering, I didn't like it. I quit after the first, I was in about a year and a bit. I didn't stay in very long. And oh my goodness, everybody had a opinion, a comment about it. It wasn't my stick. So why continue to get farther in debt, or why continue to be in something where I'm feeling like I'm obligated? And that obligation, for those listening, is usually coming from our surroundings, people outside of our sphere that really shouldn't have an opinion about what we do with our lives. It doesn't mean that everybody in our lives aren't giving us good advice or aren't giving us something that we should acknowledge. But bottom line, talk to people that have been doing what you're looking at doing 3, 5, 10, 20 years, and see if they're happy. If they're happy, that's an indication maybe you will be. It's not a guarantee you will be, but it'll give you an indication that maybe, this is something you want to do. It doesn't hurt. It's back to talking to people, right? Go to talk to somebody that's an actuary and say, hey, how long have you been doing it? 10 years. What are their pros and cons of you doing that? Guess what? Most people will give you that information without paying for it because they want to share about their lives. If it's crappy, they're going to share it. You're going to get puked all over. If it's happy, you're going to get happy. Maybe you'll get a combination of the both. But, bottom line, invest in yourself. Realize that not everything's going to work out. And you might have to pivot and change maybe your why was wrong. Maybe your why was directed by the people in your lives, right? Because you were confused and unsure what you're going to do. So they pushed you with love and intent, right, to help you out. And then you found out 6 months or 2 years later, it's not for you. Go ahead and change. I started in electronics engineering, and now I'm in finance the last 20 years, right? I think they're a little bit opposite, right?
Yeah. You something you said right there, Dwight, really, and I forgot the name of this concept or bias that we have, but a lot of people acknowledge how much they've changed. Like if you look back 5 years, but when they forecast forward, they're not, they think what they want in the future is going to be exactly what they want right now. And that is a huge bias that we have as humans.
Yeah, I can't think of the term either, but it's true. So really, bottom line, even yourself, You
Mhm.
reached out. I caught that part of your conversation. You said that you reached out and made phone calls. You had it as part of your goals, and you asked questions. What's going on in this area? And that's what we should do in life. But we're so conditioned by society that, oh, what are they going to think of you if you ask that question? Or if they ask you a question, we're very calm, or we're very elusive to our response when people ask us questions, because we're always worried about what other people think about us. Really, bottom line, it shouldn't matter what other people think of you. You have to like what you see in the mirror, develop yourself in the best possible version of yourself, and then work with those around you that are attracted to you, and you're attracted to them, and your associations. So that's one of the things I'd like to get into now is associations, our connections. Do you believe that our associations that we have are that powerful in our life, and help us fail to move forward?
Um, I mean, I would say your close friends are very important. There's that saying, like, you are, the average of,
The
I
five
don't know,
people.
three or five, yeah, five
Yeah,
people you
yeah.
spend the most time with. And I think it's really true. So it's very important to think very carefully on who you're spending time with. And uh, I'm not going to say just cut some of your friends out, but genuinely think about who you're spending time with, and what types of people they are, and how that reflects on you.
Is there any way that you feel that a person should evaluate their associations? Have you ever given stock to that?
That's uh that's a really deep question, Dwight.
It's
um,
something we
yeah,
have to be
yeah.
aware of, though.
I mean, there's been a couple friends in my past who I have had to do like a hard cut because of something they did to either me or someone else, and I like had to, draw a line. Um, but it's really tough, and I know there's so many emotions involved in making decisions like that, and it can be complicated by, how close they are with your family, for instance, or um, on a certain team. But yeah, it's a very delicate process, and I don't know that I've really found a great way to think about going through that exercise.
Oh, okay. Well, and that's fine. You know what?
Uh-huh.
That's what this is all about. People getting to
Yeah.
know, like, and trust you, and myself, and being genuine, being honest. You're still a young gentleman. Over the last, at your age, I didn't know what I know today. Let's be real, right? We're a combination of our mistakes, our triumphs, and it creates wisdom. And myself, I have developed processes where I filter out associations. And you're right, family is so important for us to be cognizant of where they fit within our lives. But that doesn't mean that we can't selectively approach them and utilize our time with them in a very, constrained way, so that we still have that connection, but we don't allow their toxicity to slow us down in our drive to move forward. So we won't get into too much more about that, but I literally have worked on this for a long time, and I coach people on what I call the 70-30 principle. My avid listeners are probably smiling or nodding their head, because I talk about it quite often, in regards to the fact that you literally hang out with people, in a nutshell, that 70% of the time they make you smile, and you can't wait to read their stuff, or hang out with them when they walk out of their room, or they leave a Zoom call, or you can't wait to see their post again, because they make you 70% of the time feel glad and happy, right? Because you have that connection. 30% of the time, we can't all have 100% connection with people. We may disagree, but in our thought processes, or when we're with somebody, we agree to disagree and we walk away. And that's how I apply it. That simplistic to everybody, even family. Obviously, like you said, you got to be cognizant. You can't just go, okay, you're my sister, cut you out. You're my parents, cut you out. So in some cases, you have no choice. There is cases where that happens. I have that happen with the people that I have coached, and even in my own life. But I just look at everybody in my life So Jack, we're talking and I'm enjoying this right now, and I can't wait to have another conversation with you. That's an association I want. But now all of a sudden, every time Jack and I talk, 50% of the time you make me feel queasy, right? 50% of the time you make me feel happy. I might have to reevaluate that association. And Jack and I aren't going to talk very often, because if I'm always unsure if I'm going to be happy or sad, that's not a great association. So I keep it that simple, 70-30 or 50-50. But I appreciate your honesty, brother. That's what we need in life, is for people to be vulnerable and honest. And you're doing a great job at that. And I knew this would be great to begin with. So we're going to go away from that. We segregated to something that I was going to discuss later, but things happen when they happen. That's called a conversation. So one of the things that I'm passionate about, we talked a little bit about, is personal finance. And as I mentioned, for 20 years, I've been doing this. I've been teaching people how to live life on purpose and not by accident. And the steps are very simple. And unfortunately, people in society today complicate it, because we've never been taught by our parents, by the school system, by our society in general, on how to live life on purpose. And really, I just want to see your take on it. It's as simple as tracking your expenses versus a detailed budget, and implement and achieve your life goals by living with those numbers. So if a person has a goal to achieve a rental, get out of debt, go on a vacation, buy this, buy that, if they learn how to budget their inflows and outflows, I believe in all cases they can accomplish it. Timeline, that's dependent on what their income is, depending on what they want to accomplish. So, I know you're a passionate person about finance, because you've talked about it. What's been your experiences in regards to budgeting and how it can help people, or yourself, pardon me, accomplish your goals?
Mm-hmm. So I will admit I have not really set a budget until like the last 4 months. And that's because I never really felt like I needed to, because my net worth kept going up. And that would get me to my starting spot, I would say, is start tracking your net worth. Because I think that's actually easier and less granular as setting a budget. And I do it every 10 days. And I've been doing this now over 2 years. And I think it really helps. I mean, you probably don't need to do it every 10 days, but I have a lot of loans that are paid on different days of the month. So I like going through the exercise of seeing some of the loans being paid down when they're due. And just so you get more comfortable with managing, both the assets and liabilities sections of your personal balance sheet or net worth. And I think that's the best exercise I've gone through, I would say, in my journey thus far. And I would say budgeting has been helpful now because when I got married, and my wife wasn't working initially, I got a little disconnected with what our new expenses would be, because now we're basically I'm paying for two people. And so that was kind of, a new thing for me. And that's where the budgeting, I think, helped. But I could originally see that I needed to set a budget because my net worth stopped going up so quickly. And I was like, okay, I need to re-examine our budget, or we need to make a budget. But I would say, if you're starting out, one of the best things I would recommend is learn to make your net worth statement or a personal balance sheet. And I think that'll go a long ways in just making it front of mind, and just you being cognizant of how your decisions are affecting your net worth.
That's awesome. I appreciate the honesty and the response. I completely agree with the net worth statement. It's one of the first processes I go through with people, and teaching them the rules of the money game and how to move forward in their lives. Once I get past some of their personal problems and challenges, because our finance is tied to where we are between our 6 inches. Part of that education process, I do 3 things within the first few meetings. I do net worth, because I want to see where they're at, and I want them to see where they're at. I want them to be shocked. And it's not hard. I use an Excel spreadsheet that I've been using for 20 years. One side's assets, one side's liabilities. Bottom, here's your net worth. It's pretty simple. But people, I'd say 95% of the time have never had their net worth calculated. At least 95% of the time. Very few have ever done it. Even wealthy clients of mine have never had. They know they got money. They know they're wealthy, but they don't really know what they have. And when I do it and I break sometimes obviously it takes a little bit longer for certain people. They have more assets. They're shocked, but it is a realization. And then we tie it to the fact, well, what do you want to accomplish now? What are your goals? Okay, this goal is great. What are you bringing in for revenue on your business? What are you bringing in for income from your career? Okay, what is this going to cost? And we literally break that down and put it within a budget structure so that they know that they're not living with a more month than money, right? And most people, sadly today in North America, 91% of people are dead or dead broke at the age of 65. And a lot of that we can't stop the people that pass before they're 65, but the people that are dead broke, it's because they don't understand their inflows and outflows of money. 2-3 weeks into the month, they're broke, living off lines of credit, right? Living off loans, whatever the case may be, credit cards, just trying to get by because they've never been taught to save or to aspire to chase their goals that they want. So obviously, a little bit more in depth than where you're at, which is fine. Yours is working for you. There's nothing wrong. So I'm not here to say that what you're doing is wrong or it's right. I think a lot of what you're doing is amazing because most people do not even know what a net worth statement is, right? So in a nutshell, those listening, your assets, your liabilities. So what you own, what you owe, right? In a nutshell, subtract them. That's what your net worth is. It's a little bit more detailed than that, but it doesn't have to be complicated. You can Google the term of how do I do my net worth? And there's so many different sites that even have applications you can run for free to figure out your net worth. But, that's cool though. Every 10 days, I've never thought of doing it that often. But I guess when you're tracking what you're doing, it's a little bit, everybody would be different because you're doing real estate. Like you said, you have loans and you're paying things off and you're staying on track for where you want to accomplish things. So that's great. Obviously, if your net worth's going up, you got some assets that are increasing your revenue, obviously, in order to pay that off, to have that asset increase, your revenue's coming in. So good for you. I would highly suggest you keep on budgeting. I do it for people all the time. And it's not even about the fact that you have to constantly update it. It just keeps a person on track where they bring in this amount of money. This is what they're spending. This is what they have. And now they know they can go out and get another chunk of land. Maybe they can do some more land flipping, or you can go purchase you have enough to easily afford doing whatever you want to do, whatever investing you want to do. Most people I find that are in real estate don't invest too much outside of real estate. They stick to that, and there's nothing wrong with that. So appreciate your candor and your honesty, brother. We're going to move on. Unless you have something else you'd like to add. Okay, so this is something I really interested. You brought it up in your origin too. So a pivotal time in your life is when you were fired in 2016. Can you share with us what the epiphany you went through back in 2016 that changed the trajectory of your life, like in more detail?
Sure. So, luckily at the time, and I was still studying for the actuarial exams, and when I first moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, I actually was paying, I think, like $1,400 a month in rent. And a year in, I realized I wasn't really enjoying a lot of the stuff I was paying for at this, fancy apartment building. So I found that, and there was a nonprofit organization I would go to, and they actually would subsidize living and in return, you would throw 4 or 5 events for the community each month. So I lived in one of these houses. So I ended up getting rent, I think was like $450 or $500 a month. So super cheap. So I was lucky I had that, in the sense I was able to save a lot in those 6 months before I was laid off. And I had saved up so much money. I kind of thought I needed a pause. I needed, kind of a reset. And that's when I decided to take that trip to Europe. And it's just, I'm very fortunate I had that, because I sometimes wonder, if I hadn't have been fired, would I have thought a lot of these things? And because that gave me the space to just be by myself a little bit, for an extended period of time and read, because I had grown up not liking reading. And I think it was just the books that we had read in school, I just wasn't really interested in. So I just needed some experience to spark my curiosity enough to start reading. And that experience happened to be visiting the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. For whatever reason, I mean, I was there in December, and it's very eerie being there. It's just so vast, it's hard to imagine. I mean, you can see barracks basically as long as you can see. And it's December at this time, it's snowing. I'm thinking to myself, how does anyone survive this? And honestly, not many people did. But I started learning about the people that survived and just some of their experiences, and that kind of got me down the rabbit hole of reading about all these other things. And it just took one experience to spark my curiosity to start reading. So I guess on that note, if there's anything that you're super interested in, I guess I would just start reading, and hopefully that will lead you to some good information and some useful insights, because that was probably the most life-changing experience of my life.
It would be, absolutely. Bottom line, one of the things that people do not realize, that life happens for us, not to us. So that, like you mentioned, what would have happened if I wouldn't have been laid off, right? Where would you be today? It was meant to happen. The biggest thing is, though, is you chose to run with it, to do something different in your life, to start reading, even though you weren't a reader, and you just pretty much looked at that circumstance, going back to Poland, looking at the concentration camp. It was an epiphany. It was something that was a wake-up call that was meant to happen. You were meant to get laid off. You were meant to go to Europe. You were meant to experience that. And you met your wife, as you mentioned, over in Europe as well. So all those little things, all those little dominoes happened for a reason. They happened for you, not to you. But most people are like, in life, boo-hoo, woo-hoo, why did this happen to me? Why does the universe hate me? Why does God hate me? The list goes on, instead of realizing that maybe it's a giant beacon, a giant, light flashing, saying, hey, time to wake up and change. And you were a person that realized that and changed. So I appreciate you sharing that. I can't even imagine again what you went through, experiencing and seeing that concentration camp. I've seen pictures. I've talked to people about it that have been there, and it is truly a time in history that so many people suffered. Like you said, most people didn't even make it through that, and it should, hopefully, those even never seeing it, just listening to what we're talking about, it gives you a better sense of gratitude and gratefulness for what you possess, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jack, you released a book called Make Better Bets, where you explain the process of what you did to make bets on the World Cup soccer in 2018, yet you never achieved success with the process. You still wrote a book about it. What was your drive to write the book, and what can people expect to learn if they read it?
Sure. So that book, I wrote after the 2018 World Cup, and it started out as I was just doing a post analysis of my betting allocation. And for people that don't know, the World Cup is 8 groups of 4 teams, so 32 teams. And each group, the top 2 teams make it out. The bottom 2 teams are eliminated. So a lot of the bets had to do with just who was getting out of the group and who wouldn't get out of the group. And I went back and did I guess I would call it a holistic analysis on the exposure to each group, and whether I was too heavily weighted in certain groups or not weighted enough. And I had so much fun doing this project, and I really think I can take, I see the steps on how to take it to the next level. And this is just another type of passion project that I think paid huge dividends, even though I guess, like the near term was not super successful. We actually did bet on France to win it. But overall, we did lose a little money because I think we ended up making like around 40 or 50 bets. But I learned a ton on just organizing in Excel and VBA, which is the programming language to automate mundane tasks in Excel. So I got to use some of my actuarial training to help with this project. And I think this project helped me become a better actuary. And I learned, and then in this post-analysis process, I was like, man, maybe I should just put this in a book and then maybe I'd make money that way. So then I got to learn about how to, write a book and get a cover design and put it up online. And so it's been a lot more learning from that passion project. And I do go, I would say if you're any sort into sports analytics, this would be the book for you. It's just very analytical on how I set up the model, and I go through some of the coding techniques if you're at all interested in getting better at Excel.
Sweet. So it is something that's educational, and you also share the processes of what you went through along that journey for the World Cup in 2018.
Yep.
Fantastic. I like the fact, though, that you shared that it was something that taught you to learn more, like putting a book together, the cover design, and getting a book out there. And there's always things that we can learn, right? You didn't focus on the negative of it. Like you said, you made 40, 50 bets or whatever the case may be. Maybe you made a little bit of money here, lost money there. But the end result is you wrote a book about it. It taught you some skills, your actuarial stuff about Excel, and just the list goes on. It's very positive. You're a person that's driven, and those that are listening, if you want to succeed in life, you have to be driven. You have to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone, because no success has ever succeeded, or a person, has never succeeded when they live inside their comfort zone. And Jack, you're somebody that definitely doesn't. So I appreciate you sharing that. One of the last things I want to talk about is you are an accomplished actuary. Most people don't even know what an actuary is. So, I'd like you to share exactly what an actuary is and why, it's something that can be an important skill to understand or to appreciate and learn yourself.
Sure. So a lot of people see actuaries as professionals in risk management. They are oftentimes employed by insurance companies. And for example, my current role, I'm in a valuation role, and we are basically putting a value on the reserves that the company should hold to pay out future benefits to clients. So, a life insurance company might sell life insurance. They might sell some annuities, and it's basically about budgeting for a big company on how much they're expecting to pay out in the future and how much. And there are some procedures on how to discount those future cash flows to the present. They do a lot of different like interest rate scenarios, and it can get quite complicated. But at the end of the day, it's basically a glorified budgeter and kind of like a bookie at a sports book, honestly, because you're kind of setting the odds, and you need to understand the odds. Now, a bookie would be like, the odds of Team A winning and getting an equal amount of bettors on both sides of the aisle. And the insurance company needs to come up with certain mortality tables for life insurance. And then the people that buy annuities might have a maybe higher longevity, so that they would have a different mortality table associated with them. And it's just using all these different tools to properly reserve for the company. So I would say if you do pursue this this field, you're in for a lot of learning, and you'll learn a ton of Excel and different actuarial softwares, and just you'll be very competent with computers, I think, by the
Well,
end.
and you'll be very knowledgeable because I've dealt with lots of actuarials, right? I do life insurance. Um, I'm familiar with annuities and how all that works, and in every country is different. In Canada, the government forces them to put a certain percentage aside. So then they also have to understand that so many people at my age are going to pass away. So, and so many people won't. So if so many people at my age buy annuities, what are the longevity of them having to pay it out for long term so that it doesn't, because bottom line, business is business. The insurance companies need to make a profit, and most of them are publicly held, so they need to keep their stockholders happy. And it's quite interesting. Obviously, listeners, people watching, we won't get into the details. I'm a numbers guy, Jack's a numbers guy, so we can appreciate it. I know I appreciate it. That people don't realize how important actuarial stuff is in regards to life insurance, paying out annuities, even pension programs they use it on. Because in Canada, I'm not sure about the US, insurance companies take care of all pensions for corporations. It's not dealt with by the finance industry, it's dealt by the insurance industry in Canada. Because really, who knows actuarial rules and laws and forecasting better than the insurance companies? So it just makes sense that if they have a segment of population that's going to be retired, they want to know that they're going to be able to, it's going to be funded correctly so that these people can be retired until the day that they take their last breath. So I appreciate you sharing that. You're one of the most unique guests I've had in a long time in regards to tying things into finance, for real estate, for just stick to itiveness and knowledge and understanding that goal setting is important. So I appreciate you being on and sharing with us. The last thing I want to ask you is, Jack, if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
I cannot reiterate this enough, but I would say just pursue passion projects just for the sake of it, because you will hopefully learn a lot along the way, and you never know how these different projects will lead up to bigger and bigger skills down the road, and you might be able to connect dots that you thought never would have been able to be connected.
That's a great last message. At the end of the day, pursue what you're passionate about. If you're unsure what you're passionate about, sit down, figure it out. In order to figure that out, you might have to try a few things. It's life. School of Hard Knocks, which is life, doesn't necessarily give you a predefined recipe for success. There is success does leave clues though. And how do you find that out? Well, somebody like Jack might write a book, and that book might share some information, the trials and tribulations he went through, and it took him X amount of time. And now you take less of that time to do the same thing. It's either going to teach you how to do it in a shorter period of time, or it's going to wake you up and say, this really isn't my passion. This isn't really my why or what I want to do. So I appreciate your straightforward, honest answer. It's true. Just go out and do things. Check it out.
Check it out.
Yeah. So I respect your time, brother, and I respect my listeners' time. However, before we end, can you please tell the listeners what's the best way to reach you?
Sure. So I am the only Jack Allweil on LinkedIn. I'm probably the most active on there. My brother and I also, within the last 2 years, started a podcast called the Brothers on Books podcast. And if you go to brothersonbooks.com or look up on any of the podcast platforms, you can find our podcast. And we basically are just curious guys, and we read books and discuss them. So it's kind of like a virtual book club. And those are the best places to find me.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that goes into the show notes so that people can reach out to you and connect. And for the listeners that are new, you can find the show notes at www.giveaheck.com. Go into the podcast portal of the website, and you will see Jack's face, and you will see the show notes below, along with the link on how to reach out to him, whether it's on LinkedIn or you want to find out about his podcasts. Any last closing comments that you'd have, Jack?
Just thanks for having me on, Dwight. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome, brother. Appreciate you being on. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for being on Give a Heck, Jack. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck.
Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.